I mean, there's a lot here. And I think more than anything, we need to take a beat. Like, we need to take a beat because we have continuously been reactionary this whole school year. And we're looking at a system that was, eugenics created and focused based on an industrial business model, right? And so if that was the intention of the formation of public schools, what is the intention and the purpose now? How are we going to be relevant for our students moving out into the space that they need to? And, Zeke, I love what you guys talk about with entrepreneurs and mentorship and this idea, but this is where they start, right? Right?
Same business, different day.
Good afternoon and welcome back to the Same Business, Different Day podcast. My name is Zeke Corley. I like to start off the conversation by introducing my co-host, Alyssa Lee Good. I pride myself on being smart enough to surround myself with smarter and more talented people. So, that's my talent. I want to say one thing though. Since the inception of this podcast, we've set out to motivate our current and future business owners. We've had influential guests and told some inspiring stories. And in today's episode, we want to take a slightly different approach and focus directly on our future, the children. I was listening to an interview on one of the late night TV shows the other night, and Eddie Murphy was being interviewed. A father of 10 children, he said, if you put your children first, you'll never make a bad decision. Now, we can laugh about the source of the quote if you want, but as a father of 2, I couldn't agree more. For today's episode, Alyssa and I have decided to put the children first. We won't have the time to tell the origin stories of each of our guests this week, but please be clear that these guests are just as influential as any we've had on this show. These people put our children first for a living. So let's introduce our guests. First, I want to introduce Candice Kordis, an educator and administrator in the Vista Unified School District, whose email tag also says, "Let's rethink high school," a subject we won't be able to avoid discussing today. So thank you for being here, Candice.
Thanks for having me.
LyRyan Russell, who has a master's degree of school and college counseling from the University of San Francisco and is now an educator and counselor at Sacred Heart High School in San Francisco, California. Thank you, LyRyan, for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And Amy Siegel, a special education consultant and advisor in all things education in San Diego County. We are happy to have you here as well, Amy. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
I want to also say that we've invited college admissions personnel and a high school principal who either declined or were unable to make it. We will also be having a meeting later with another educator this afternoon to extend this episode, as well as discussing the thoughts from students who have written in. I say that to say that our goal is to have as well-rounded of a conversation as we can. I think we will do that with the guests that we've chosen today. This is not a political conversation. This is, as always, on the Same Business, Different Day podcast, a conversation for those that will impact our future. So for this conversation, please, Alyssa, can you give us the purpose of this conversation?
Right. So essentially last March in 2020, the world changed for everyone. Educators had a sudden and very difficult decision to make. We were experiencing COVID for the first time in the United States. And nobody wanted to shut down the schools, but it became necessary for everyone's safety. So today we want to talk a little about the challenges, the successes, and the remedies of what we've gone through and where we're going.
Good. Real quick, though, I want to just give a little touch of our typical podcast style and just get kind of a little bit of a background, if you don't mind. Let's start with Amy. And can you tell us like when you got into education and why?
Pretty much it's the only thing I've ever wanted to do is work with kids. Every job I've ever had from the age of 12 when I started babysitting, always been interested in working with children, and I gravitated pretty quickly early on in high school to special education and having a real love for helping others that maybe need help advocating for themselves. I've been doing everything in the education field. I was the center director of the preschool. I taught preschool. I taught for my undergrad 0 through 6th grade. I did for my master's an internship as a special education teacher at a high school in Connecticut. And then I came to California and did START work and state child development work, so worked in the nonprofit sector that way. Then moved on to the regional center in San Diego as an education consultant, helping service coordinators and families navigate special education. And IEP development. And then when that job due to state cuts ended, I still felt there was a passion and a need for it. So I've been doing that independently for 25 years now.
Wow.
So work all over the county, every district pretty much I've been in. Not every classroom, but definitely every district. And just have been working with families and students from the age of early start of 0 to 3 all the way up through high school and transition.
It's wonderful. And I can tell you from personal experience that Amy is great at what she does. LyRyan, how about you? What got you into education and, in that career field?
Well, I had a previous career before education. I was a professional basketball player. I played in Europe for 8 years. And for me, sports doesn't last forever. So it was trying to figure out what to do after I was retired. So I ended up being a mentor at a high school, at an independent high school here in San Francisco. I knew the dean, and he asked me to come just work with a few students a few days a week. And after the first day, I was like, this is it. This is where I need to be. So it just took off from there. The following year, I got my master's in school and college counseling. And I've been in education 12 years now. Can't believe, wow, 12 years, about that. But I've worked in public school, private school, independent. I've worked for a nonprofit. I think in education, what people don't realize, you wear at least 6 hats with your job and connecting as many resources as you can with schools and family. With students and family. But it's been great, even though a lot of stress that comes with the job, but we're doing it for the kids and doing it to help families. And one thing I will say, you can tell a true educator, because not everybody's built for this. Not everybody is built for this. If you're looking to get rich in your first 7 to 8 years, this is not the profession for you.
I love Amy.
Yeah, Amy and Candice shaking their heads at the same time like backup dancers.
but it's been great. I definitely have enjoyed it. The different aspects of my job that I've had while being in education. And I like to say we're in the seed planting business because we're planting seeds with kids that blossom later most of the time. So you might not see it with your time with that student, but just know that your work does pay off.
That's beautiful. Thank you. I appreciate that. So how about you, Candice? Has it been 12 years for you yet?
Oh, and a few extra, right? I'm what they probably call a lifer. I've never left the education system. I was in high school planning to head out to be here, and that was my dream. And this idea of then being into an internship where I experienced some real politics and decided that wasn't really my jam, and was doing some side jobs, during summer, working at the local high school and an avid tutor, working at Upward Bound. So a lot of work with our disadvantaged populations. Myself had grown up as a disadvantaged individual. A lot of times I think that's something we don't address. that, the color of my skin or my gender. There's a lot of assumptions that are made about that. And I think that really that made me question a lot of things going through college and looking at the politics. And that was my major, political science. And so a mentor suggested, hey, you're really gifted working with these kids. Why don't you consider teaching? And there's many times I've lamented how that made the fork in the road. And, it's like gone the money route, like we were talking about, right? And been a lawyer and worked 180 hours a week, or I could work 180 hours and be a teacher. And, but I think it's that servant mindset that, we serve the students that we work for. And I think that those, their needs are what is important to us. And so for me, my leadership experiences came out of wanting to make a difference. So that's why I pursued my master's and pursued going into administration. And, it's kind of jaded, I think, about what your impact is and how much impact you can have in the classroom versus how much impact you can have in leadership.
Sure.
And, I connect with LyRyan's comments about sports. I was a longtime coach. So definitely seeing that connection. And then both my parents became educators later in life, interestingly enough. And then my mom started off as a paraprofessional as well, and as a special education educator. So that's kind of been our life. We're a life of, the school systems. And then, yes, you're right. The Transform High School, part of our grant that we received was to transform high school. And that was actually part of the impetus for me to go into administration, of wanting to make those changes. So I actually was one of the people who was jumping for joy at the pandemic and turning our system on its side, really hoping that we could make some changes. And so I'm excited to have this conversation with y'all today.
That's such a teacher thing, looking at a serious problem and seeing opportunity. So let's take a step back and think where you were at, when you were hearing about possible closures, hearing about the serious concern of safety due to the illness. What were your initial thoughts? What were your initial concerns going in about what to do and how to handle this and what was going to happen?
How about you, go, Candice?
Oh, okay. I think immediately was the unknown. And I think in education, we sometimes feel like we pivot, right, quickly. And there's this opportunity for us to have a health and safety concern and have a reaction to that and a plan for that, and to make, real choices and decisions that we're going to support the, basic Maslow's need of safety, right? And so, how can we learn? How can we produce? How can we, stick to the, pacing guides that we have and still ensure students still safe? And I think that was kind of the first reaction I have, is how are we going to manage both realms? I don't think that we shut down. I think that's a misnomer in our in culture and the news media. Schools didn't shut down. We just operated differently. And I think that we have asynchronous situations, right, where they just kind of were given assignments. But I think we had we attempted to have the best continuity we could in a brand new structure that we hadn't seen before on the large scale. So we looked to models that existed. What other schools have already been successful in the distance learning environment? Where can we get additional input, insight? So definitely we were in a emergency response mode, I think, those first few months. So I think that's where we definitely began in reactionary position.
Sure.
Okay.
I can imagine, Amy, though, you probably had a little bit different perspective when it came to that, because you had, well, tell us what you were thinking, what was going on when you saw things happening.
So definitely, the first thought is, because working with the special education, definitely lots of kids have additional health issues within their diagnosis. So first and foremost, yes, how do we keep and then not quickly after that with special needs learners and needing the proximity to
Amy, you froze a little
access.
bit. You froze a little bit. Tell us again what you were saying. First and foremost, what? I want to make sure I didn't miss that.
Besides the health issue, I was very worried about how kids would respond to digital learning when they require so much one-on-one proximity to instruction and materials. Many kids have never done well with online. When classrooms do video type work or video scenarios, even if they perseverate and just want to watch a certain bit of a video over and over, but they're not able to take the information in that way. So I was very, very concerned about would kids be able to learn in a virtual learning opportunity, and about regression and just behaviors that so many families and educators have worked so hard to eliminate or minimize, and what would this do to the behavior scenarios that a lot of the kids work through. I work with cross-diagnosed, but a lot of the kids are diagnosed on the spectrum somewhere.
Sure.
So, also worried about the social issues that would happen. Just not having maybe access to peers, either in a personal way or at all, depending on their situation, at home.
LyRyan, along with your initial thoughts, I'm curious if you had student feedback. What were the kids saying, hearing that they were going to have to do school from home?
There was mixed reviews. Some students are thriving, and I don't think they get talked about it enough as well. Where some students are like, "Hey, I keep to myself. I can get my work done, so I'm just fine." I'm not the most social person, so this model fits me. So I've had that, and then along with Amy as well, I deal with kids across the board, whether they have learning differences or high needs as far as social emotional education, academic, and everything. So it's been mixed. I've had students that have been the social butterfly at school, and because of being at home and having to learn from home, they've really suffered because they're not around their friends or getting that social aspect that they thrive on. So it's been mixed. I think the flip side of it, the adults have struggled as well. I don't think that gets spoken about enough, where you actually have educators who have to try to figure out how to have differentiated learning lesson plans for kids via Zoom. So that's been a big issue. And then I think it's a little bit of a catch-22 as well. I don't think us adults were prepared how much kids do learn online. I know so many kids that go to YouTube and will learn how to play a piano. Like working at a private school, literally had a kid, he's like Mozart, and he taught himself how to play the piano on YouTube, or how to build things or how to fix things. Students are really resourceful when it comes to online learning. And I think us as adults, we kind of got in that phase where we have to teach you and not utilizing some of the aspects of social media or virtual learning that best suits kids. At the same time, there was no way we could prepare for this. So like Candice said, we have to do a lot of adjusting on the fly, where we have to change how we taught our kids, the type of work, try to make it as engaging as possible. And that was another thing from students, that they just were not engaged. Like right now, our students are done. Like the last April and May, I hope we can make it through safely, but all of my students are checked out.
Ignoring squills and warning lights on your car is not a good way to lower the cost of owning it. And going without essential business insurance is not a good way to save money in your business. What we know for sure is doing either will cost you more than you will save in the short and the long run. With YourInsurancePlace.com, you can trust a specialist to help maintain your cars and avoid major expenses. Business owners should look to business insurance specialists when it comes to finding competitively priced, quality insurance coverage for their businesses. At YourInsurancePlace.com, we specialize in workers' compensation, general and professional liability, employment practices and cyber liability, property owner policies, and bonds for most types of businesses. YourInsurancePlace.com knows that we can help. If you're uncovered, need to lower the cost of your current insurance, or need better coverage, we can help. YourInsurancePlace.com has been helping businesses for close to 40 years. If you need a quote on your insurance, call us now at 858-569-8100 or find us at YourInsurancePlace.com. We are business insurance specialists ready to help.
Vista Chamber of Commerce is a proud supporter of the Same Business, Different Day podcast. We support our business members with promotion and marketing, business referrals, educational opportunities, workforce development, and advocacy. Check us out online at vistachamber.org.
The Film Hub is the future of co-working right in downtown Vista. Get energized to go to a safe work environment that is clean and sanitized. Create video content, live stream events, and all of your marketing material in our audio and video facility. The Film Hub. Do your best work here.
But definitely for the families I work with and associate with, it's been incredibly challenging. And pretty much all the students need direct supervision, and parents work. So, I mean, there's, of course, that whole balance of, do I keep my job so we can, afford the lifestyle we're in, or do I give up a job so I can sit with my child? There's a lot of different dynamics. And, there's one pie and lots of pieces.
And that's,
they're just,
we're having that. I'm having that, personally at home as well, where it just became a marathon. And, at first, both of my children were thriving. Now, one of them is really struggling to finish off these last 3 months of school. To the point of, I'm not even going to take that test, or I'm not even going to turn that in, just completely checked out because this mundane everyday routine of, get up from your bed, go to your desk, do your work. You're still sitting in the same house, in the same room. And then, at the end of from bed to desk, you take a shower at the end of it for what, but it's one thing to do that for a few months, but it's another thing to do it for a whole school year. And so that's the concern there too, is how do we, re-engage them to finish off the year strong? Because as, different from at the end of last school year, and I'm not sure how it was in other school districts, but at the end of last school year in this school district, Vista Unified, they went pass fail, whereas this year all these grades matter, and these grades are showing to be lower. So that that's just my personal experience, just kind of piggybacking off of what you were saying about some of these kids checking out, because checking out isn't fruitful for your education, and it might not be something that they would do in a normal school year.
Yeah, Zeke, you hit on a couple things, and LyRyan made me kind of, again, for me, I think, our lexicon is so important, especially in this space, as we are modeling our attitudes and belief systems for our kids in our homes, right? Mm-hmm. So, before students were having the school setting, for me personally, I know when I was a student, that was a sanctuary. Sure. There was routine, there was safety, there was adults, many adults who were invested. And so I definitely see that feeling of change where, school is now in our homes, our bedrooms. I've even seen it in our closets, and I think that reality, I also think that we hear so much in the media, this deficit mindset, right? As opposed to the value add, like LyRyan was speaking about. What have we learned? What have we gained from this exposure? The resilience, the persistence, the flexible thinking that happens with our students and ourselves as adult learners. And I think oftentimes, especially at secondary, that's where I've lived my career, there's this expectation that the teacher is the know-all, be-all, end-all of disseminating of information. And like, LyRyan spoke about, a student can learn YouTube, by accessing that information, where before you'd have to go to the library, have that moderator, right? That gatekeeper of information no longer exists. Okay. And I think that there is some fatigue, right, of that mundane, that routine. But did we not see that too when our students were in person? So I worry about how we talk about, we have to get back to normal. What is that normal? Are we going to backslide into some routines and situations that our students have experienced a different normal? in this last year, and what can we take from that as we move forward? The IB Director General had a podcast, and she spoke about what's going to be our off ramp, and I thought that was very powerful. What is going to be our off ramp out of this pandemic, and are we going to elevate our practices based on what we've learned this last year, so that we're taking that to be a value add?
Sure.
And to me, I think that's because I think what Amy brings up about, like, there's real angst, right? My own child as well. High functioning, comes from a family of educators, and wants to take async days all the time now. Just like, I'm done. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a real component, because I think there's the learning piece. And I have some perspectives about, what it is that we're doing, that we're defining as learning. But I think there's also the real part of school, which is socialization. And I think that's where the emotions come about, where we hear kids that are struggling because of that socialization that happens in schools, the unscripted, the ungraded parts of our learning experiences.
Mm-hmm.
Let's skip to socialization.
I just wanted to ask.
Go ahead, Amy.
Yeah, Amy, yeah.
I definitely think there's also a distinction that needs to be made between younger students or children. I do think there is a difference between, obviously, high school or upper division students, and also general ed and special ed. And it is hard because we can't put every cookie in the same cutter. Like, there's different shapes and sizes of every student. And I do think through this pandemic, it's somewhat exacerbated or shown those differences even more. And since, pretty much every student I work with in family, they may have opportunities to be included in gen ed, based on the student's ability, but primarily the kids' placements are, with speech therapists, occupational therapists, special educators. They're in a different learning environment. And, we talked a little bit how it affects, not just the students, but the parents or a family dynamic. And, parents are not therapists either, and so for special ed, I feel any issue that's been an issue has been even exacerbated more for those families.
Wow.
And that's not taking away from any family or any other student. But when I hear a lot of discussions or in the media, it does seem to focus more on kind of the gen ed population or the higher, middle school, high school students. And the foundation happens so much younger. It's like we got to remember the littlest of our kiddos.
Yes.
So I just wanted to add that.
That's great. That's a great ad. I'm glad that you're here today to add that piece for sure.
I remember I used to work as a paraprofessional, and we had a few kids in their IEPs. Socialization was a part of their educational development.
Right.
And, it was walking around the playground, making friends, learning how to have a handshake, which we're not doing anymore anyways. But it is a serious part of their development, and they're not getting it right. Well, I don't know. Maybe some are getting it. I'm not actually in the field anymore, but I'm sure that many missed out on it.
Yeah, can I touch on that?
Please.
Real quick. So, to Amy's point, and I had a student. I worked at the middle school level as well. I'm at high school right now, but I worked at the middle school level, and there was a kid that was in special ed, and he was a handful. I'm just leave it at that. But he liked basketball.
Okay.
So I told him, I'm like, hey man, if you can get together, I'll let you. And I was a basketball coach as well at the middle school. I was like, hey, if you get together, I'll put you on the team next year. And he was like, what do I have to do? I said, well, if you can meet with me twice a week, you get your homework done, and we minimize some of the issues that you're having at school, where I can help you talk through them, I'll put you on the team. You won't have to try out. And he did it. He really did it.
Mm-hmm.
So he made the basketball team the next year. He was a big part of us winning the city championship on top of that.
Okay.
Cool.
But, people started recognizing him as a different person and started acknowledging him as a different person. And I bring that up because the unfortunate thing about special ed is kind of like you're over here, the rest of the school is over here,
Mm-hmm.
and don't even look at the kids as human beings sometimes. And I think that's the tough part of it. And it's kind of like anybody that works in special ed is kind of like, hey, you got them over there, you're good. We're going to leave you over there. We're good over here. Just make sure they stay over there kind of thing. And, the adults that work in that don't get enough support as well. Um, and you're right, Amy, it has put spotlight on how we educate our kids, especially special ed kids. And now we're seeing general population kids have the same kind of anxieties and issues that come along with special ed at times where they have the IEPs. And now I have a million parents asking for IEPs and 504s now because of the things that are coming up. So,
wow.
I hope we do take a step back this summer and really re-examine how we're educating kids. And Candice, I'm ready to hear, get rid of high school or alternatives to high school? I want to hear about this. You might have me hooked in, and I got to move to SoCal, so I'm ready to hear this.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think that there's a lot, right? I mean, there's a lot here. And I think more than anything, we need to take a beat. Like, we need to take a beat because we have continuously been reactionary this whole school year. And we're looking at a system that was, eugenics created and focused based on an industrial business model, right? And so if that was the intention of the formation of public schools, what is the intention and the purpose now? How are we going to be relevant for our students moving out into the space that they need to? And, Zeke, I love what you guys talk about with entrepreneurs and mentorship and this idea, but this is where they start, right? It's through the public school system, this, provide for the general welfare, right? Here's my political science nerd coming out, right? That this idea, like, that is our charge. That is our charge as educators, and to, secure the blessings of liberty, right? Those pieces, those elements of what is it that we're then going to do to ensure? I mean, and, again, I'm jaded. I think every student should have an ILP, right? I think that we do need to personalize learning. And that was part of the transformation, LyRyan, that we've espoused, right? It's aspirational. But we also have these constructs and these confines and these shackles of a system and a structure and a bureaucracy that we have to operate within. So we are subject to decision makers and policies that exist. And yet we're boots on the ground. And we see the struggles that the students are having. We hear what, their voices are saying to us. And then there's this challenge of how do we reconstruct? And I think if we just continue to throw stuff at the wall and hope it works, that's foolish, right? That's malpractice. So how do we, again, come together, get the voices together in even a venue such as this, and really talk about what can it look like now? Because LyRyan's right, there's lots of kids that have been flourishing in this environment. And we've always seen that as, the kids get home hospital, the kids get special, the kids go to a charter. Those kids go over there. Or like Amy's talking about with the special education students, or, those students are separated, right? This idea of full inclusion, we haven't really embraced that, right? We haven't really owned that. So how do we make that? And it's the adults, right? We know the structure, right? We have this structure in our mind of what school is supposed to look like. But how do we get innovative and operate within a structure that's still dominated by external forces? That's, so that's the transformation challenge that we're trying to, grapple with right now.
So another thing I want to talk about is the challenges that students face at home. If it's inhibiting their learning ability, if something's getting away, some have, more opportunity, more privilege to sit alone in a room. Everyone has a computer in their home, whereas others, are sharing a computer between 2-3 siblings. I watched my mom. She was a high school English teacher at the start of the pandemic. And I thought what she did was neat. She had a one-on-one conversation with each of her students saying, what's your situation? Are you sharing a computer? Are you doing chores for your parents? Are you taking care of your baby sister? And so she wanted to know what each student was going through, and that helped her assess, how they're going to be able to handle the situation. But that's just one teacher, and there's so many students out there. Some teachers don't have the time to do one-on-one like that. And so how do you approach that with all these students and acknowledge not all of them are going to have the same chance. Not all of them have a parent sitting next to them to help them, especially if it's a kindergartner or a first grader. What do you do? Specifically for the kids that need the extra help from their teacher who can't come into the room and help them.
How about you, Amy?
Well, for the kids I work with, that's every student basically.
Right.
Requires, support to be successful. And even then, I have families sitting with their special ed, child, and they can't handle the input of a computer. I have one student that it causes seizures to be really locked into a computer. Mm-hmm. So, every student has been so different, but I would say, there's definitely a few, yes, that are the highly, maybe on the spectrum that the social angst of school and the competitiveness of school has been removed online because they're in their own room, in their own environment, and those kids have done okay. But by and large, most students have really, and families have really struggled because the students I work with or support, they can't work independently. And it's been very, very challenging. And obviously, it's gone on a year now. So a lot of families use the phrase lost year. How do we help our son or daughter learn skills that they missed or they're regressing because they haven't had the right type of services for a year? So, again, compared to more of a general population, it may or may not look the same, but definitely for the families I work with and associate with, it's been incredibly challenging. And pretty much all the students need direct supervision, and parents work. So, there's, of course, that whole balance of, do I keep my job so we can, afford the lifestyle we're in, or do I give up a job so I can sit with my child? There's a lot of different dynamics. And, there's one pie and lots of pieces.
That's right.
So.
That's right. And then for you, LyRyan, you're in a private school. So, when we talk about, the subject of, so-called privilege, it may not necessarily be at your school, but at least, I'd like to hear, what your thoughts are on the impacts there.
Yeah, well, at private schools now, you have both ends of the spectrum where you have the affluent families and you have the families that really need help.
Sure.
That middle class family is not really there at the private school level anymore. I feel like that's our public school kids now. But it's been a challenge. As a counselor, I definitely had to be as creative as possible. I had one student who literally with divorced parents, so splitting between two homes. Dad's internet is better than mom's. Parents are working. And his whole first semester, he struggled. Second semester, with me, with kids, I like, what do you like? Let's not even talk about school. What do you like to do? Like, tell me about that. And he started to open up and he said he was a Boy Scout. And that's what he missed the most right now he's a freshman, but he's not able to be with his Boy Scout group. I said, I got something for you. So there's a teacher at our school that coaches my freshman girls basketball team, and he was a Boy Scout growing up. So I connected those two, and that helped the parents because now the kid has somebody else that he could talk to, somebody else at the school, and it just made him. I think a big part of this is just trying to make sure that kids stay connected with the school. So it gave that student at school connectedness. And I give that example because that's how creative I had to try to be
right.
To keep the students engaged, to help the families where, I'm reaching out to rec centers for park and rec to see what programs they have to try to connect with the school because at a private school, it's kind of sheltered where we don't have a lot of community-based organizations that come into the school and work. with the students. So with me, I'm kind of breaking code and like, hey, we need these CBOs to come in and help these students. So that's been a huge help because there are nonprofits and community-based organizations that do help families, and it's been weird with the response. They're kind of like, your school needs help? Wow, okay, I thought y'all had money. Okay, all right, well, we're here to help. So I've been getting that response, but it's hopefully the school looks at it as, continue these partnerships with these community-based organizations even after the pandemic, and not just make it seem like we're just using them just to get through it.
Okay.
Yeah, I think if anything else, the curtains have been pulled back, and we see Oz. So things that I think have really been begging for our attention: equity, culturally relevant curriculum, student advocacy for their own learning. Like, those are things that have kind of been in the background this whole time that are now in the forefront because, again, our education system is in everyone's homes, right? So I think some of the things that the disparities, right, those existed before we had virtual school, right? The students who had, to take care for their siblings, that had to work extra jobs, those things already existed. Now it's just right in front of our faces because we're seeing it on the screens, or the students are not even engaging on the screen, right? You mentioned that, Zeke, about how this disengagement piece. And students who could go to school and kind of tune out, or put their earbuds in and kind of do that work avoidance scenario. Right now, they just turn off their computer screen, right? They turn off the video and they disengage, and we don't have that way to really understand, well, what's the cause of that? And I think that every student has a story, and I think that the idea of actually making those connections, it is timely, right? It does take time in a class at a high school level, multiple classes, multiple students, but right now, it is that basic need, right? That connection. What is your story? What is your situation? We can't just make these assumptions. And like Amy said, the cookie cutter model of education, we got to let that go. We have to really look at what do kids need on an individual basis, and how can we, support that? And it does take time. It does take resources like what LyRyan's, speaking about. This, we had a huge grant given to us to transform, in our district. And it's not just throwing money at the problem, right? It's much larger perspective, and it's very complex, right? It's not binary. It's not this or that, but it's really looking at from multiple angles of how do we really make sure that the issues, like every kid in our district has a Chromebook, but what about the Wi-Fi? What about that access, right? What about for me, it's my internet is jamming up because there's so many users now.
Right.
So we lose connectivity all the time. And so it's even that piece, and that can get perceived as a student disengaging when it's really a technological issue.
Hi, I'm Jeff Fox, founder of Star Fox Media. We're a digital marketing and video production company that focuses on serving small businesses here in Vista, California. We have the team and all of the equipment necessary to produce, film, edit, and distribute your podcast to as many people as possible. For more information, you can reach out to us via email at info@starfox.media or give us a call at 760-385-3117. Let Star Fox Media help you tell your brand story today.
North County Daily Star is the leading source for news and community information. There are 650,000 residents along the 78 corridor and 5 unique cities that share the region, North County, San Diego. We work and play in these cities, so we are all interested in what happens in our common region. There is no cost to subscribe, and it is continuously updated, so look for us on your mobile device or computer at ncdailystar.com.
The San Marcos Chamber of Commerce is the voice of business in San Marcos. With over 50 years of service to the community, we continuously evolve to meet the needs of our members and help solve problems. Our strategic plan is based on 3 pillars: advocate for our members and small businesses. During this pandemic, we have participated in letter writing campaigns to the governor and have made statements during county board meetings, city council meetings to help businesses open while following health and safety protocol. We continue to work with Cal Chamber to oppose job-killing bills, and we also take stands on propositions that we support or oppose depending on how it affects our small businesses. Another pillar is promoting San Marcos through special events such as festivals, farmers market, Taste of San Marcos, and most recently, candidates forums for the school board elections and also city council. The third pillar is we also provide valuable resources for our members through webinars, networking events, as well as access and introductions to people that will help your business thrive. For more information on the San Marcos Chamber of Commerce, please visit our website at sanmarcoschamber.com.
I've seen in the past 4 years a spike in anxiety, a spike in depression,
Right.
And it's really probably like 40% of our student population that's like that. And I'm thinking it's just because it's a private school, but my counterparts in public school and independent schools are seeing the same thing. So, and it's all grade driven.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if they go from if you want to see a kid freak out, and it's not funny, but I'll bring this up as an example, and then I don't want to hog the time, but you see a kid's grade drop, whether it's from a B to a C, and the amount of anxiety that happens right away. And if it gets to a D, that student's just like, there's nothing I can do.
Yeah.
I give up. You know, so the impact it's having on students, I think goes back to Amy's point. Elementary is so critical for the foundation that we lay at that level, but we don't continue it to the middle school and high school level. Like, think about it. Play nice. Be friends with everybody. Accept everybody how they are. Make sure you share. That's not revisited. And those are some of the biggest issues at the high school and middle school
Yeah.
level. So,
Some of the
That's
biggest
true.
issues at the top of politics.
right. You know, so yeah, I think that we should reexamine and improve on how we educate our children.
I appreciate that. And I think that one piece, though, that I did want to just say, though, I mean, you know, because, and I did say at the beginning that I was trying to get a college admissions person in here and wasn't able to, but I am curious to see how they're looking at this past year. I'm curious to see how they're looking at these grades. I'm curious. I was curious at the end of last year. I think you remember, Amy, when I was trying to figure out how they would even look at the pass fail. Because, you know, hey, you know, I've got one honor student over here who's got these grades, and then I've got another student who I had to, you know, cut off his math class towards the end of the year, but he could have passed it. We just, you know, we could have snuck through him with a pass, and he would have been looked at just like anyone else. But you know, to another point, though, Amy, LyRyan spoke about anxiety and depression. And, you know, again, we've had this experience, too, with my son. Amy has helped me with his IEP and, you know, trying to come up with strategies to deal with, you know, the pressures that he was dealing with in terms of the grades. And, you know, of course, like you said, Candice, partially due to me and the pressure I'm putting on him when it comes, hey, look at this grade dropping and not really realizing, hey, we've got a smart kid here and there is another approach to it. But, you know, we are all trained to see that grades meant so much. Mm-hmm. So, Amy, I know that you deal with that, the anxiety and depression of kids probably to a higher level than anyone.
Yeah, I mean, there's really those kids that absolutely, you know, the depression, anxiety with grades or performance, you know, it's a big issue. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, I have the other half of the people I'm working with that, I mean, they just want their kids happy, like the bottom line, like, you know, where their kids are at developmentally and where they're at with whatever their medical diagnosis is. They just want them safe and happy, mm-hmm. You know, and so, you know, some of this discussion, I'm thinking like, okay, but not even every kid is going, you know, to college, community 4-year, it doesn't matter, or a trade type college training program. You know, a lot of the kids I work with, they're going into a community-based type job coaching type scenario. And a lot of those opportunities have shut down for over a year because businesses are closed. You know, you can't be in person. And so, again, it's not just about the next step after high school being college or a trade type situation. If some of, the special ed population, they're going to some type of group training, job coaching scenario that really don't exist very much right now. And so, it's still a continuation after their high school career, but how do we address that? Because we can't just say, oh, well, it's not happening.
Mm-hmm.
They still need training and, so it's challenging. Definitely dealing with all the situations,
So there's, it is so complex of what questions, and I think having that inquirer mind of asking the questions and continuing to dig deeper. I have a lot of students who their situation is we found out they have lost family members. They're grieving, they're hurting, but they won't tell us that.
Right.
So I have to hear from another friend, another student, because they just don't express, they don't share their personal stories that way.
That would be really hard to handle from a distance, first of all, and then as an educator, educators are there because they care about the children, and so that's the priority. And then if they're not reaching out to you for help as they would in person, how do you assess that situation? That's difficult.
Yeah, and that's interesting. When we first started the school year, we had an option. They were telling us that you could go in classic or you can go in virtual at the beginning of the school year, and I gave both of the kids that option. And my daughter was the one that said, and she's the honor student, right? She's, always been. And she said, I want to go virtual. I'm comfortable in my home. I'm in my room. We painted it real nice. It's nice in here and it's great. And, she's the one struggling at the end of the school year. And I remember speaking to her specifically, telling her that, that connection with the teacher is really important. You might want to choose, to actually go in there. The teacher can see how you learn and all of that. Now, of course, as we see how it all panned out, there was no chance that she could have stayed in class the whole school year anyway. No one could. But that was her choice at first, and she does regret it, I think that the conversation about curriculum is important too.
Yeah. Right? So when this all started, curriculum it still mattered, but it was more about let's just stay involved. Let's still remember that we're in school and that we're learning. And a lot of districts adopted the pass-fail system, but then starting the 2020-2021 school year, grades, you have to have a transcript. So I'm curious, should curriculum be altered for this? Does it need to change? And how do you address the students that are struggling due to economic reasons, due to things beyond their control?
Go ahead, LyRyan.
Oh, go ahead. You got it.
I was just going to say, I'm really passionate about this because I do live in the land of the honors kids who are looking at, we need GPAs, we need this, our scholarships and all of that. And I think that, first of all, what are grades? What are they measuring, right? What are our grades measuring? And I think that in, the pandemic going past fail, lots of heat on it, right? Lots of heat about it. But I believe it was the right decision. Colleges are now going test optional now. I believe that is the right? They're more holistic in terms of college acceptance. And I think that looking at a more holistic perspective is key. And I think that, sure, there's this idea, and we have to have a measurement. I agree with measurement, but it has to be valid. It has to be reliable. And I think that's where, what is it that we want to measure? And then we develop the curriculum to match that. And I think that that's what needs to happen. And I think that, again, going back to your equity question, that is even more important about what is the curriculum going to consist of that we want to measure? What is it that we want students to leave our institution knowing and being able to do? What kind of humans, right, are we helping to develop as they leave our institutions and go out into life? And I think that's where the crux of this lies, because that's a heavy lift.
Mm-hmm. LyRyan,
I think some aspects of education is all about money, right? I mean, if we're being honest, and and to push kids towards college, where you go into debt for the majority of your life trying to pay off that college debt. And at the end of the day, I think the last study that I saw with the data of college graduates was like 2019, and it was hovering around 30% of adults 25 or older had a bachelor's degree. So what do grades really mean if you only have a quarter or a third of the population that's really getting an education? Like, what does it really mean? Especially with all these entrepreneurs and people making money. Of course, that gets highlighted a lot, but it's like, what do grades really mean? And I try to bring that perspective to students. Like, I don't want them to think that an A in a class validates who they are as a person. So just as a counselor, I just want them to put things into perspective. I had a student that was a 4.5, had a 4.5 GPA. He made a Rubik's Cube that played music when you were solving it correctly.
Wow.
And when you weren't on the right track, the music stopped. And he's stressed out about going to college. I said, come on, man. I'm like, your attitude, really? You could be the most arrogant person right now. Like, who does not want me to go to their school? But I just look at it because that's how families and students have so much anxiety about grades. Like, I need this grade to go to this college. And I'm like, dude, you probably make a fortune off this. Mm-hmm. You took the one thing that not many people in the world can solve, and you made it solvable for everybody. So just, I think that gets overlooked, the talent and the innovation that some of these students have, a lot of these students actually have. And it's just more towards grades. And I wish we do something about that. I wish there was a way for us to be a little bit more innovative, be a little bit to evaluate, be better at evaluating some of these students and how to measure their success. I know the San Francisco Unified School District, we're moving away from homework and just looking more at a mastery of a subject versus penalizing a student that is passing all their tests but don't turn in their homework. So there's that battle where, well, you're going to get a C in this class even though you got 100% on every test. So, I think, once again, we need to reevaluate how we're assessing these kids and everything, and students, because I've seen in the past 4 years a spike in anxiety, a spike in depression,
right?
And it's really probably like 40% of our student population that's like that. And I'm thinking it's just because it's a private school, but my counterparts in public school and independent schools are seeing the same thing. And it's all grade driven. Mm-hmm. If they go if you want to see a kid freak out, and it's not funny, but I bring this up as an example, and then I don't want to hog the time, but you see a kid's grade drop, whether it's from a B to a C, and the amount of anxiety that happens right away. And if it gets to a D, that student's just like, there's nothing I can do. Yeah. I give up. So the impact it's having on students, I think goes back to Amy's point. Elementary is so critical for the foundation that we lay at that level, but we don't continue it to the middle school and high school level. Like, think about it. Play nice. Be friends with everybody. Accept everybody how they are. Make sure you share. That's not revisited. And those are some of the biggest issues at the high school and middle school level. So,
some of the biggest issues at the top of politics.
Right. So I think that we should reexamine and improve on how we educate our children.
I appreciate that. And I think that one piece, though, that I did want to just say, though, I mean, because and I did say at the beginning that I was trying to get a college admissions person in here and wasn't able to. But I am curious to see how they're looking at this past year. I'm curious to see how they're looking at these grades. I was curious at the end of last year. I think you remember, Amy, when I was trying to figure out how they would even look at the pass fail. Because, hey, I've got one honor student over here who's got these grades, and then I've got another student who I had to, cut off his math class towards the end of the year, but he could have passed it. We just, we could have snuck through with a pass, and he would have been looked at just like anyone else. But to another point, though, Amy, LyRyan spoke about anxiety and depression. And, again, we've had this experience, too, with my son. Amy has helped me with his IEP and, trying to come up with strategies to deal with, the pressures that he was dealing with in terms of the grades. And, of course, like you said, Candice, partially due to me and the pressure I'm putting on him when it comes, hey, look at this grade dropping, and not really realizing, hey, we've got a smart kid here, and there is another approach to it. But, we are all trained to see that grades meant so much. Mm-hmm. So, Amy, I know that you deal with that, the anxiety and depression of kids probably to a higher level than anyone.
Yeah, I mean, there's really those kids that absolutely, the depression, anxiety with grades or performance, it's a big issue. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, I have the other half of the people I'm working with that, I mean, they just want their kids happy, like the bottom line, like, where their kids are at developmentally and where they're at with whatever their medical diagnosis is. They just want them safe and happy. Mm-hmm. And so, some of this discussion, I'm thinking like, okay, but not even every kid is going, to college, community 4-year, it doesn't matter, or a trade type college training program. A lot of the kids I work with, they're going into a community-based type job coaching type scenario. And a lot of those opportunities have shut down for over a year because businesses are closed. You can't be in person. And so, again, it's not just about the next step after high school being college or, a trade type situation. It's some of, the special ed population, they're going to some type of group training, job coaching scenario that really don't exist very much right now. And so, it's still a continuation after their high school career, but how do we address that? Because we can't just say, oh, well, it's not happening. Mm-hmm. They still need training and, so it's challenging. Definitely dealing with all the situations, with the students, the family dynamics. I mean, administration-wise within school, and every school district is handling everything so differently. Mm-hmm. I know, it's Russell, you're up in Northern California, but certainly just from a county of San Diego perspective, every district is doing something different, which is also very stressful and confusing for families and students because people have relatives in other districts and kids are talking. I think that's added to some of the stress and anxiety is, well, how come they're doing it this way, or how come they get that, or how come, they're pass fail, but we got A's and B's, or how come we get our last grade as of March and we don't have to do any work potentially for the next 3 months, so we can still keep our grade. So, I mean, everything was done so differently. I think that fueled some of the angst and stuff that was happening as well. I don't know about Northern California, but certainly in San Diego County.
No, you're absolutely right. It really does depend on the school district, which depends on the state and the county. There's just so many different variables across the United States where nobody's on the same playing field, and it really does cause a lot of confusion in education. But to your point, in high school, everybody has to be UC or state school eligible, meaning they have to take certain required classes in order to be eligible for like a UC Berkeley or UCLA or Cal State LA. So it puts the entire state on the same playing field, but now you're not going to get into UCLA. Now you're not going to get into Cal because they're going to take the out-of-state kids because that's double tuition. Now everybody's on the same playing field in California where it's harder to get into those schools. So now our kids are leaving the state. Now you're having to pay double, and it goes back to my thought of money making, where it's really not fair, because even though everything's on the same playing field as graduating high school, each district is doing something different. So that just muddies the water with education and direction with kids. So if I have a cousin in Oakland and a cousin in San Francisco, they're getting two totally different educations. And it's sad where Oakland may not have as much money as San Francisco because San Francisco may have more resources. Now there's even more of a disparity between the two. So it's just, I know that sounds confusing, but it really is like that. And it's really like, where do we start to fix the problem?
Well, let's not forget,
and
LyRyan,
so much.
Let's not forget the parents who can buy their kids' way into college. I know some of them get prosecuted.
Yeah. Right. Absolutely.
I want to open a conversation about arts education, sports, and club activity, which has disappeared for a little while. I know some districts have been able to bring it back. I have an uncle who lives in Northern California. He's a band teacher, and he did everything he could to coordinate a band online, and it didn't work. And it was hard for him and hard for the students. You know, you ever hear a band student, all they talk about is band, how important it is to them and how it created who they are. And to not have that, it was difficult. But obviously it was necessary. And so how do you account for that? How do you alter and give them the opportunity to still have that connection? And then I'm including sports and clubs, and that's sports for health and fitness, for leadership, for teamwork.
Socialization, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Clubs, same kind of stuff, community service, all these things that colleges look at and then also influence your work ethic down the line.
Right.
That needs to be incorporated. And so how do you do that remotely?
Candice?
I think that's where the challenge lies, right? Because we have this expectation that all of a sudden our students are going to become independent learners, right? And that they just jumped into the pandemic. They know how to TikTok. They know how to online learn. It's all good. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's part of it, right? And I think LyRyan touched on it, this idea of having the adult educators create that space and place that will foster those opportunities for access. And how do you create that? And we've seen it on the news, right? The whole choir group and the band, and they create these amazing productions. But that's because that's something that they've built into their school culture. Like LyRyan spoke about, each school has its own culture and dynamics and expectations. And so to come up with how do we create this continuity, this equity in terms of sports, right? Coming from the coach realm, it's been frustrating to watch what's been happening with sports. And I know we don't want to go politicized, but it's become politicized, right? Mm-hmm. Right. And this idea of the fitness piece is good. The extracurriculars, that's what brings kids to school, right? It's, again, that social component. And those are the soft skills where our students really can take out, like what Amy said, not all kids are going to college. And so what skills are necessary? Even now, the research is showing us and businesses are telling us, we'll teach them the content. We can, in fact, secondary education is becoming redundant, right? We need them to come with collaboration skills and other kinds of things that they would learn through those extracurricular activities. Right. So we want to get them out in the playing field, but yet we still have this safety and health concern of an unknown end, right? An unknown variance of what this is going to look like in the long run. And so it's how do you balance that? And I think that we've seen a variety of ways of doing that. Coming along with the Zoom pieces, we've brought small cohorts, right? I think that's been probably the most effective way, is bringing small cohorts of students onto campus so that they can access those clubs, those opportunities. We brought the sports that could be more socially distanced as an opportunity for an outlet. Do I think we leveraged that enough? Probably not. right? But again, it's because we've still been in that emergency mindset, and the metrics change, frequently. The expectations change frequently. We get new, recommendations that we have to monitor and make the adjustments for. And so I think that our students are also kind of caught in that conundrum too. And I think they're confused, right? Do I show up for practice? Do I get to do practice? And right now, all three sports are in the same season. So we've got athletes that are literally competing in a sport, changing their clothes out, and running to practice. I mean, that's, as a former coach, like that's just a recipe for injury, right? And these young formative athletes, but some of them are chasing this idea of a college scholarship. So, I'll leave that in, that's not my domain. That's, LyRyan's lane. So I'll stay out of that. But I think that it's, what is the intent? If the intent is to socialize, if the intent is to build those skills and to make connections, then that needs to be our focus. And then we need to come up collectively with a way to engage in that. We got 2 months left of school, right? What can we still do, right? Let's not end this, right? What can we still do to make those connections and allow for our students to, still make progress and still make connections?
I love it. LyRyan, you want to chime in on that a little bit?
Yeah, I want to chime in. I am a high school basketball coach, and I run our Black Student Union at Siegel Cathedral as well. So just trying to keep people engaged this whole time. It's been easier with the club because we can meet via Zoom and plan and organize things. So that's been going really well. And actually having more people have time to be there because probably half of our members of the BSU are athletes, so they're not running out to practice and everything. But the sports one has been, I've been on the fence with this. I know there was a lawsuit not too long ago that granted sports to come back and be played to end the school year. And I was actually on a Zoom call with coaches from my league that I'm in, WCAL, West Catholic Athletic. I'm not being cut with this, but we have a very high profile league in the state of California where we have a lot of different sports with players that are highly ranked in the nation. So it's very competitive. Our sports are always in the mix of playing for state championships. So it's a very competitive league. But literally, coaches were complaining about the amount of games that we can play. Because up here in Northern California, you can't play a school that's either that is not directly touching your county. So if a school is 2 counties away, you can't play them. And with our league, just as a demographic, San Francisco to San Jose is about 45 minutes. And that's where all of our teams lie in our league. So we can't play teams in San Jose, and the counties that are between us is San Mateo and Santa Clara County. And of course, Santa Clara County even shut down the 49ers this year where they couldn't even play at home. But we can't have games with teams, every team in our league, and our coaches were upset. And I have to tell them, like, look, we're coming from a place of privilege. What about all the public schools that have to have their season canceled this year?
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of San Francisco public schools. There's no football, no basketball. San Jose Unified School District, no sports at all. And we're complaining about being granted the privilege to play. Mm-hmm. But that goes back to disparities in education where the schools that have money are able to play. But what about these public schools that have great athletes too? Mm-hmm. They can't play, or they don't have the resources to have clubs and collaborate. Hey, it means a lot to be a moderator for a BSU and have that on your college education. Mm-hmm. Your college application.
Right.
And there's a lot of schools that can't do this right now in the pandemic. And I like to remind people, like, we as a private Catholic school, we sit in the place of privilege, and we can't abuse that. You know, it's always a reminder. And with sports, it's so crazy. You know, it's always been this talk all year about rushing back. And I'm like, if the NBA, NFL, NHL hockey, Major League Baseball, NCAA, if they can't get it right, how are we supposed to control sports at a high school level?
Right.
And you talking about billion-dollar corporations with pro sports and Division I basketball and football, and they can't control it.
Mm-hmm.
Like there was an NCAA game last week. They got postponed because of
Well, they had to forfeit.
Game. We're game. We missed. So I'm having a season.
You cutting out there, LyRyan.
Football for us. Our list. So if there's a positive COVID test, then your school misses 3 games. So you have 10 days you have to sit out, but there's 3 games scheduled, and we're only slotted to play 4 games. So I've been saying, is there really a point of having a season this year? Right. I know we want to get the kids out there, but it's already happened in football in our league. It's happening across country. And so was it worth all this to have 1 meet or 1 game?
Yeah.
To where now your entire team can't play? So it's a lot of debate, and I'm on a fence. Yes, I want to get the kids as active as possible, but we need to do it as safely as possible.
Right.
Because the flip side, we still don't know how people are gonna, for the long haul, their bodies are gonna react from having contracted COVID.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know.
That's right.
We really don't know. And to your point, Candice, if you got kids playing 3 sports at one time, who's going to be liable for when that kid gets hurt? Because it's going to happen.
Right.
It's going to happen. You can't go from football to basketball to baseball. I'm sorry. I mean, not everybody is Deion Sanders, where you can take a helicopter from an NFL game to a Major League baseball playoff game.
Yeah.
But we're talking about kids right now that are eager to get out there, which I don't blame them, but we're not protecting them. Like we're not. Like, why would we allow a kid to play 3 different sports at one time? Like, that's just not. And now you're taking contamination to 3 different sports. That's the flip side.
But I think, LyRyan, you speak about that because it's the business piece too, right? You know, and we've educated parents that they've got to like pay these auxiliary coaches on the weekend to get their kid leveled up. They got to play in all these tournaments. They got to go all these places because that's what's going to get them the scholarship. And I think we're miseducating our families on that. I think we're selling them a bad bill of goods, right? And I think that, you know, and you know, I come from the track world, right? So I'm like, friends, we have this many track scholarships. So, you know, like, you know, and you think you're going to a D1 school, you have this many, you know, and so it's like, but we're going through the, you know, what do you take from this? The teamwork, the health components, right? Time management. How do you manage your practices? You know, Saturdays, you know, any of you been in track, like we got a long Saturday haul, right? So, you know, how do you manage that? And what are the benefits of that piece of it? And I think that, you know, this idea of, like you said, who is our end user? And I think so often we get caught up in forgetting that, right? These are 14 and 15, or, you know, in Amy's case, it sounds like, you know, 5 and 6-year-old kids, right? And it's our job to be their stewards, right? It's our job to be their protectors. And, you know, every 14-year-old can be like, yeah, I want to go out and play 3 sports. Yeah, I want to go out this, because, you know, they're Superman, right? You know, I mean, that's their mindset. And they literally don't have the cognitive development, right, into their 20s to have that forethought of what are going to be some consequences of this. And so that's our role, right, to guide them, to mentor them, and to exhibit that ourselves, right? And I think that's, you know, they see and they watch on the news these other states that are doing this, that, and the other. I mean, you mentioned, LyRyan, you know, just what's happening in your neighborhood, but, you know, we have kids that are challenging us because, you know, well, Texas is playing ball. You know, well, these guys are doing that. Like, why can't we? And, you know, and then, like, you know, you mentioned, Zeke, like our politicians, and they see what's happening and how they behave, right? our behavior as adults, and we wonder like, oh, these bad kids, right? No, they're not baby's kids. They're our kids because they're they are mirroring our behaviors.
Right.
Like that's what we have to really take ownership of, I think.
Agreed.
So that's my thoughts. So.
I appreciate it. And as we get ready to wrap up, I wanted to have you guys say a last word to our seniors. I think the seniors in high school right now, we're going through a major transition on a really tough year. And I appreciate, just whatever message that you have for, what they've got to go through. I know at the end of last school year when they had the drive-by graduations and so forth, at least in my neighborhood, that was tough. I felt bad for them then, and that wasn't a whole school year of this, so now after, this type of school year, and my son being a senior who's, set to graduate and his grades are looking awesome, he's made it through this year, but this is certainly a different year. I was just telling Alyssa, we just got an email the other day, prom is canceled. I mean, and understandably, but it's just a different year. So, Amy, can you start us off with like a little message to the seniors?
I feel for all the students. I mean, because this is nothing any family or student signed up for in a sense of
right.
how they envision, their education to be the last 360 plus days. I probably look at it a little bit different than the other panel people, just because I'm looking at it as, again, a lot of the special education seniors have suffered their opportunities to have learning the last year. And, parents are being asked, for their students to now move on to a transition program that's not open, they can't observe, there's nothing to see. And, districts don't even know what it'll look like. And so just the blind faith that's being required of families right now, I feel, is pretty insane. I mean, these are their children. So, I just feel for, the students and the families in special education right now that there's a lot of unknowns, but I feel like it's exacerbated when your child has special needs or can't communicate for themselves.
100%. 100%. Thanks, Amy. How about you, LyRyan?
I think for me, they literally have gone world history. We have read about world history, but to actually live it and go through it, I remember reading about this pandemic back in 1919, but the fact that we're in it and these seniors have did it, they made it through. Just want to let them know I'm proud of them. And really, there's nothing that can stop you, not even the pandemic. You did it.
Thank you. How about you, Candice?
Well, I certainly echo that message, right? This is the class of COVID, right? There's no other unique feature that we have in history, since, the flu, in the early 1900s. And I think so the message I think I would have to our seniors who are graduating, again, stay in the mindset of value add, right? Don't get caught up in this, what have I lost? What did I miss out? But what is my value add? What is my legacy? What's going to be my story, right? This is your narrative. And you get to tell your story and your narrative. So be bold with your voice. Share your story. Share your position and your perspectives because they are valuable. They are valued. With that boldness, cause a little good trouble. Because I think that right now we are ripe to start talking about some questions and some conversations. And it's always our youth, right, that take and make the transformations in our cultures, right? It's always the coups that happen is the youth, right? So it's that generation, right? It's your energy that we need to go ahead and push forward these conversations that are so key to making a value add society and making us better, right? So, make that loud noise.
So as we wrap up, I want to finish the little story that I was telling earlier about my daughter and what we were going through, and her response to choosing virtual versus classic learning, the classic learning model in school. And we talked about, the one-on-one with the teachers and all, but what she specifically said was, it's no big deal. I'll learn from home. We all learn the same. All I have to do is just get the work done. And I think this conversation today proves and reminds us that we don't all learn the same. Mm-hmm. Right. So I really appreciate you guys being here. We want to ask for contact information.
Right. This is a really important conversation to have and keep having. I mean, there's still a lot of work to be done, and a lot of change, I think, is going to come from it in a good way. And so if people want to reach out and have this conversation with you or someone in the educational field, who can they contact? How do they reach out to someone and say, I'm a parent and I have this concern, or I'm a student and I have input? Who do they talk to?
I think that, our publicly representatives of our school boards is a really good place for those letters and contacts to go to. Your school administration, I think your school counselors, they need to hear those voices. I think that's definitely a place for definite input, right? To look for the community forums, get involved with those opportunities to publicly speak and share their stories.
Thank you. How about you, Amy? Who should we contact, who do we contact to continue this conversation?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely in special ed different avenues than the more general population.
Right.
A lot of schools, there's community action committees, which is kind of, I guess, to put it in a layman's kind of term, would be a special education PTA group.
Okay.
So a lot of schools or districts have the CAC, community action committees. Another is if you're concerned about your child needing a 504 or an IEP, definitely, talking to the main teacher and also the school psychologist on your campus is generally the first point of contact to developing or figuring out if any assessments are needed. And then, if the child has special needs, certainly if you're looped into regional center, they can be quite helpful contacting the service coordinator through your regional center. And other nonprofits, Autism Society, there's a lot of parent groups that have gone virtual. Some are starting to do some meetups at parks and distance, activities, but definitely reaching out is the best thing. I mean, we have to help each other right now.
That's right.
Yeah.
If you need to reach out, definitely reach out.
All right. Beautiful. LyRyan, last word.
Yeah, definitely reach out to your teachers and counselors. Definitely build your allies up. And then you got to go to the admin, and you got to go to the school district, the decision makers.
Mm-hmm.
At the end of the day, you can bring stuff up, but education, things move slow. So the more these decision makers hear about what needs to change, and at the end of the day, no school wants a negative reputation. So parents and students have a lot more power than they believe that they actually have. They just gotta keep speaking up and keep it coming.
Thank you. I really appreciate all three of you guys for accepting our invitation. This is exactly the conversation that we were hoping to have.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm eager to have this conversation. Education is a huge part of my life and my family, and I admire educators. I admire students for what they're going through right now. And so I hope that everyone's working towards something that we can all rely and agree on, and make those entrepreneurs for the future that we want.
That's right. Thank you guys very much. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me. Nice to meet everybody.
Thank you for tuning in to the Same Business, Different Day podcast. Special thanks to Star Fox Media for video production and James Russell on music production. Please like and subscribe to the Same Business, Different Day podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts.
Same business, different day.